Hey everybody, it's time to talk a little bit about plants and how plants are classified. When you look outside, we just think, well, plants, plants, plants. But there is a huge diversity within the kingdom Plantae. And so that's what the point of this lecture is to go through what some of that diversity is. So when you think back, plants evolved onto land, most likely from green algae. That is the protus, that is their closest ancestor. So when plants made the move from an aquatic environment and there was genetic diversity, which allowed some plants to be able to survive better with adaptations on land, there was a huge transition. And those earliest plants did not have the ability to grow into a big tall tree like you may look outside and see, or even to grow as tall as grass can grow. They actually were confined to a very, very small, short height. And so those early plants that we call non-vascular plants just didn't have a way to transport their liquids, their water and their minerals and their sugars to where they need to go, much in the way that we have a circulatory system of blood that does that for us. And so likewise, plants eventually evolved to be able to grow as big and tall as the trees outside because they had evolved a way to be able to transport those materials over a large distance. So what we're going to start off with is Kingdom Plantae is divided into two groups. The non-vascular, those earliest plants that we still have representatives of outside today, and the vascular plants. And then we'll see how they have diversified within those two groups. Okay, so for your lecture material, it's going to start off. The best way that I think to write these notes is to turn your paper landscape, and you're going to center Kingdom Plantae at the top. And we're going to do like a little flow chart. Now I'm going to go ahead to save you some frustration. That when we do this flow chart, on the left-hand side, we're going to put a very small amount of information. The bulk of our information is going to be about the vascular plants. And so probably 2/3 of the paper over here will be, so it will not be perfectly divided out. Okay, so at the very top of your paper in the center, let's put Kingdom Plantae. Okay, and so Kingdom Plantae evolved about 500 million years ago when they made the transition along with fungi onto the earth. And they've evolved all these different adaptations. And so if we look at the group, I'm going to put an arrow and I would bring it all the way over here to the left. And these are the non-vascular plants. And then I'm going to come straight here because the bulk of our notes will be here. In fact, I'll even have to erase this on my small board to be able to fit it all in. So we have the vascular plants. Okay, so our vascular plants have obviously what these do not have, what these lack. And so non-vascular plants lack roots, stems, and leaves with vascular tissue made of xylem, which goes back to the very beginning of the semester. We talked about plant specialization with some different specialized cells, and this is a specialized cell that transports water and minerals, which we'll write that over here, and phloem, which is a special tissue that transports sugars. So we find both of those in the vein of a leaf, which will be over here, these vascular plants. These do not have that. So because of that, they are very short and they have to live in places that are damper to where they can get their water easier because they cannot transport it. And usually they're found in shadier areas. So the only non-vascular plant you have to know is a group called a division. So in plants, instead of saying They do have domain, so domain eukarya, kingdom plantae. Normally we say, well, phylum is next. So it's kingdom, domain, kingdom, phylum. But instead of phylum, we use something called division. So division, bryophyta. Who are the mosses? So mosses look like green carpet. They're a very short little plant. Okay, so this is the green part of the plant. And once in a while, you'll see a little stalk that comes up like this. And inside that stalk, you're going to find the spores. And this is a sporophyte structure. This is the gametophyte structure, but the spores contain the embryos of the plant. So these do not have seeds. They have spores with the embryos inside, short, lacks those vascular tissues. Now, let's go over to the vascular side. And for me to do that, I'm going to have to divide this out. So we're going to go out like this. And the vascular side, we know they have xylem, which transports water and minerals, and phloem, which transports sugar, as vascular cells, tissue, in roots, stems, and leaves. Okay, so roots, stems, and leaves are organs. In the same way that our lungs and our heart and our brain are organs for us, those are organs for them. And they're sex organs, where we have our sex organs as animals. They also have their sex organs, and they can be found in cones or in flowers. And so that goes back to when we're talking about reproduction in plants and in animals. So if we take the vascular plants, we are going to divide them into two groups. And I would make that arrow go out a little bit, but I'm going to put it here just because of what I wrote. And these are the seedless vascular plants and the seed makers. Okay, so if you're seedless, you make spores, just like the mosses, with embryos. So, and these make seeds with embryo inside, and it's endosperm, which it uses to eat as for nourishment. And so the division you have to know is pterophyta. It's an R. That looks like that. R. And these are the ferns. And so you see ferns growing in damp places, like a lot of times on creek banks. If you go over to Finch Park and walk around the pond, you will see some ferns that are growing there on the bank of the pond. People like to hang these up like on their porches and things. So they kind of look like this. And they have different shapes. But for a fern, and you'll see these long leaves that fall down, they're very pretty and kind of graceful looking. But these ferns, they do like shadier areas, and they will have these little dots on the backs of their leaves, and they're called sori, and that's where you find the spores when it's time for them to reproduce. But these are ferns. This leaf is called a frond. And if we were in class, you would be doing a scavenger hunt. We would be walking all over campus and exploring, and you would be finding some examples of some of these things. Okay, so that is division pterophyta. Seedless, still vascular, but their babies are not in seeds. Okay, all right, so let's look at these seed makers. The majority of the plants, if you just take a look outside, will fall under this category. Most of them make seeds. They're the noticeable plants that you see outside, and this group can be divided into two groups. They are the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. Sperm means seed, Angio means covered. Seed, naked. So naked seed plant, covered seed plant. Well, what that really means is that the seeds that these produces are found in a fruit. So these are our flower and fruit makers. And the fruits do not have to be edible. So just because it's a fruit, it doesn't mean that it's something that you can consume. So an example of a fruit is one that I have right here. And this is a Japanese maple tree. And its fruits look like this. They're little helicopters. So here's the seed. The embryo is inside. This one, here's the dry fruit. So it's not a fleshy fruit. They're sticking up everywhere. But this little embryo will grow into a big Japanese maple tree. So if we look at acorns all are the fruits of oak trees. One acorn will grow into a big, huge oak tree. You look at an apple has compartments, little carpels that have several seeds inside of it. If you eat the seed, you would deposit the seed in your waste. It would be planted down, and that one seed would grow into an apple tree. So that's how the seeds work. Now, that's flower and fruit makers here. Now, over here, the gymnosperms, I'll raise this up a little bit. The gymnosperms, naked seed, means that they don't make fruits, they don't make flowers. These are the cone makers. Typically. We do have two divisions. We have the division Ginkgophyta. The ginkgo is a living fossil. It's a tree that has been in existence, that species, since the dinosaur times. And so there's only one species left of this division. And so division Ginkgophyta, also Ginkgosperm, Ginkgophyta. Phyta means plant. So the ginkgo, and they have leaves that look kind of like this. And they have male trees and female trees, and the females make it's not a fruit, but a seed, and it really stinks. So a lot of times you see more of the male trees planted. But these are found, actually, there's a church downtown that has a ginkgo tree. There is a drugstore in town that has a ginkgo tree. So these are pretty neat. They do turn yellow in the fall, and they lose their leaves. But typically, when we think of the gymnosperms, they are the cone makers, which are the division Coniferophyta, the conifers. And the Coniferophyta members are evergreen. They have needle-like leaves. So think of a pine tree. Kind of scale-like. They have cones, and the male cones are only present in the spring, and they are kind of yellow, and they have woody cones. Those are the female cones, and that's where you would find the ova, but also eventually the seeds. So anytime you pick up a pine cone, it's a female cone, and it does belong to the division Coniferophyta. And so think about, these are like Christmas tree shape. They usually grow kind of in a triangular shape. So conifers are evergreen. Typically, they do not lose their leaves during the winter time, while typically the angiosperms do. They're a deciduous tree, where these are the conifers. So when you look at biomes, this is the coniferous forest, this is the deciduous forest. So that is my summary of basic plant taxonomy. Hope you find that useful. And I know my fourth period is working on a project, and you guys also have a project that where you are going to be able to take pictures of different plants, and this will be helpful, hopefully. So I think that's it, outside of maybe I did not include the monocots and dicots over here. So I just realized there's two groups of the angiosperms. And so let me go ahead and add that over here, especially if my fourth period uses this as a reference for their project. So let's go back here to the angiosperms. The angiosperms, actually the division, didn't realize I didn't write that down either, is called Anthophyta. And they have two classes, class monocot and class dicot. And so to be a monocot leaves have veins that run parallel. So if this is the leaf, if this is a dicot leaf, you would have veins that are branched. Do not run parallel. So if you go outside and look at grass, you pick up a blade of grass, look at that, hold it up to the light, and you'll see that the veins run parallel. It would be considered a monocot. If you look at a leaf, such as this Japanese maple, when I hold it up to the camera, and you can see the veins that are running, they are branching out. They're not parallel. They would be a dicot. Another way of knowing that is their flowers. If they are flowering and you're able, if you count the petals of the flower, the petals are the pretty part that attracts a pollinator along with its nectar and its scent. The petals are actually in multiples of 3. And for a dicot, they're in multiples of 5 or 4s. So that's how you know the difference between a monocot and a dicot. All of these make flowers, they all make fruit. So until next time, our next video will actually be talking a little bit about animals. This wraps up our plant.